The sun rose slowly over the dry hills of Israel, but there was no joy in its light. The land was tired. The rivers had shrunk into thin lines of dust, and the ground had cracked open like broken pottery. Farmers walked through their fields with heavy hearts, touching empty soil where crops once grew tall. Mothers looked into empty jars. Children asked for bread, and fathers had no answer. For 3 long years, not a single drop of rain had fallen. Hunger had become a daily companion, and fear had settled into every home. In those days, the people had slowly turned their backs on the true God. They began to follow idols, false gods made of wood and stone. The most popular of these was Baal, a god they believed controlled rain and storms. They built tall altars for him. They sang songs to him. They bowed down before statues that could not see, could not hear, and could not speak. Their king, Ahab, encouraged this worship, and his wife, Queen Jezebel, pushed the people even further away from God. She supported hundreds of prophets of Baal and hunted down the prophets of the Lord. But there was one man who refused to bow. His name was Elijah. Elijah was not a king. He was not rich. He did not wear fine clothes or live in a palace. He was a simple prophet, a man who listened to God and obeyed him. His heart burned with faith, even when the world around him turned dark. Years earlier, Elijah had stood before King Ahab and delivered a message from God: there would be no rain until the people turned back to the Lord. And just as Elijah said, the skies had closed. Now, after years of drought, God spoke to Elijah again. The time had come to face the king and the false prophets. The time had come to show the people who the true God really was. So Elijah walked toward the palace. Dust swirled around his feet as he traveled. The air was hot and dry. Villagers watched him pass, whispering to one another. Some remembered his warning from years before. Others blamed him for the drought, thinking he had brought trouble upon the land. But Elijah kept walking, steady and calm, because he knew God was with him. When Elijah finally stood before King Ahab, the king's face twisted with anger. "There you are," Ahab said sharply. "You troublemaker of Israel." Elijah did not step back. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked into the king's eyes and spoke the truth. "I have not troubled Israel," he said. "You and your family have. You have turned away from the Lord and followed Baal." The room grew quiet. Servants stopped moving. Guards held their breath. No one dared speak to the king like that. But Elijah was not afraid of kings, because he feared God more than any man. Then Elijah made a bold request. "Gather all the people of Israel," he said, "and bring the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah to Mount Carmel. Let us meet there. Let us decide once and for all who is the true God." King Ahab agreed. Soon, word spread across the land. From villages and towns, people began to travel toward Mount Carmel. They climbed the rocky paths, curious and uncertain. Some came hoping for rain. Others came to see a spectacle. Children held their parents' hands. Old men leaned on walking sticks. Thousands gathered on the mountain, forming a great crowd under the burning sun. At the center of the gathering stood Elijah, alone. Across from him stood hundreds of prophets of Baal, dressed in bright robes, confident and proud. They whispered among themselves, smiling as they looked at the single man before them. To them, Elijah seemed small, outnumbered, and foolish. Elijah stepped forward and faced the people. His voice echoed across the mountain. "How long will you keep jumping from one side to the other?" he called. "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." The people looked at one another, unsure. No one answered. Their silence hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Then Elijah explained the challenge. "Bring 2 bulls," he said. "The prophets of Baal may choose one for themselves. Let them cut it into pieces and place it on wood, but do not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and place it on wood, but I will not set fire to it. Then you will call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. A murmur moved through the crowd. It sounded fair. It sounded simple. And it would reveal the truth. The prophets of Baal agreed. They quickly chose their bull and began their preparations. They built an altar from stones, carefully stacking them one on top of another. They arranged the wood and placed the pieces of meat on top. Then they stepped back, lifted their hands toward the sky, and began to pray. "O Baal, answer us," they shouted. Their voices rang out across the mountain. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Sweat rolled down their faces as they danced around the altar. They shouted louder and louder, calling on Baal to send fire. But nothing happened. The sky remained silent. Hours passed. The heat grew stronger. Dust clung to their skin. Still they cried out, their voices growing hoarse. "O Baal, answer us." Yet there was no sound. No spark. No flame. Around noon, Elijah stepped closer, watching them carefully. Then, with calm boldness, he spoke words that made the crowd stir. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Maybe he is deep in thought. Or busy. Or traveling. Perhaps he is sleeping and needs to be awakened." Some people in the crowd covered their mouths, surprised at Elijah's courage. The prophets of Baal grew angry and desperate. They shouted even louder. They danced wildly. In their frustration, they began to cut themselves with knives, as was their custom, hoping their pain would force Baal to respond. Blood ran down their arms. Their cries filled the air. Still, nothing happened. The afternoon sun began to sink lower. The shadows stretched across the ground. The prophets of Baal collapsed from exhaustion, breathing heavily, their bodies weak and trembling. Then Elijah stepped forward. "It is my turn," he said gently. The crowd leaned in, watching closely. Elijah walked to an old altar of the Lord that had been broken down. One by one, he picked up 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. Slowly and carefully, he rebuilt the altar. Each stone carried meaning. Each stone reminded the people of who they were. God's chosen people. When the altar was ready, Elijah placed the wood on top and arranged the pieces of the bull. But he did something strange next. He dug a trench around the altar, deep and wide. Then he turned to the people and gave an unusual command. "Fill 4 jars with water," he said, "and pour it on the offering and on the wood." The people hesitated. Water was precious during a drought. Every drop mattered. But they obeyed. They poured the water over the altar. It soaked into the wood and ran down into the trench. "Do it again," Elijah said. They poured more water. "Do it a 3rd time." Again, water flowed over the altar until everything was completely drenched. The trench filled with water. The wood was wet. The sacrifice was wet. Even the stones were wet. It seemed impossible for fire to burn under such conditions. Then Elijah stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. He did not shout. He did not dance. He did not cut himself. He simply bowed his head and prayed in a calm, steady voice. "Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel," he said, "let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you are God and that you are turning their hearts back again." For a moment, nothing moved. The air stood still. Then suddenly, without warning, the sky flashed. Fire fell from heaven. It roared down onto the altar like a bolt of lightning. became a symbol of courage and faith, a reminder that one person who trusts in God can change the course of history. Even today, the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel whispers a powerful message to every generation: when the world feels dry, when hope seems lost, and when truth feels outnumbered, God is still able to answer by fire.